And we obviously talk lots about words in English, in creative writing, in drama. There are important reasons why we have the word we do, but it sometimes delimits. So you think that it's only about a particular gender or particular gendered experience. And the first thing that I want to say is that feminism relates to all genders, to all bodies. Everyone is gendered. Everyone has a different experience of being gendered. It might not be sort of noticed. It might not be felt very deeply. On the other hand, it might be felt as a real constraint. It might be felt as empowering, as liberatory. We all have different experiences of that, but we are all in the world and subject to some of the same conditions of being in the world, to being looked at, being pigeonholed and categorized. So that's the first kind of point. So in relation to that, feminism is not a singular, it doesn't have a singular meaning, and it's not a singular movement. It's not a single set of issues. It can denote so many things. It's so expansive, and that's kind of what's amazing about it. The second you sort of scratch a little bit away, it just opens up and floods. So it can denote a political position, an attitude, a lifestyle, a way of being in the world. It can mean a set of cultural tastes, which might apply a little bit to what Maggie was talking about. It can call to mind issues, things that we want to fight for or against, demands that we want to make in relation to the wage gap or reproductive justice or sexual violence. It can call to mind women's oppression in all sorts of different contexts. It can also call to mind visions of love and friendship and hope and dreams of changing the world, dreams of freedom. So it's always that kind of combination of pain and joy and laughter and struggle and anger. So one of the ways I think about feminism as an approach, and this is sort of relates to how you can act in the world, but also how you can approach your creative writing practice. It requires a combination of noticing what's really going on and imagining. And I think actually the quotations that Maggie used sort of already kind of brought that into this space, noticing and imagining, this kind of twofold approach. So noticing what's going on around you. How are people being treated? What assumptions are being made, whether they are explicit or unconscious or veiled deliberately? Noticing all kinds of inequalities, whether they're the sort of everyday injustices or really massive structural violences. And in relation to that, noticing, imagining otherwise, not feeling that things just have to be the way that they are, that we're stuck in the status quo, imagining how things could be if we thought that a world might be possible without violence, without structural inequality, without harm. Sometimes it can feel impossible to think that the world can be different, but feminist sort of energy comes from working together and dreaming together and thinking about these other ways of being. So in creative writing, it means lots of things. It might mean thinking about the power of your words, how you use them, what you want to say, what you want to speak up for, or speak on behalf of, or speak against. It means also listening. How do you listen to other people? Listening, whether that means reading, observing, being in society with, refusing to reproduce the status quo, and any sorts of harmful conventions that we've kind of absorbed, that we're conditioned in, but that we can resist, that we can fight against, whether that is in behavior or in form, in style, in perspective. And ultimately, I think for me as a poet and as a tutor here, feminist approaches to creative writing are about trying to give different ways of seeing the world, of perceiving the world, new experiences. And again, just to repeat that sort of mixture of joy, love, pain, anger, struggle, grossness, beauty, all of those things all at the same time, because for me, that's what feminism is. It is capacious in that way, and that's what makes it so exciting and emancipatory. So thank you. I'll say more about creative writing later, and I'm going to pass over to Huw.
Thanks, Nisha. So I'm just going to say a few words here about feminism in relation to English studies, and then move on to a talk more specifically about gender and humour and feminism and humour. So firstly, I'll kind of address the elephant in the room as I stand here talking, with Rediscover Feminism in the background, standing here talking to you as a man. I'm very aware of my subject position, but I think as Nisha's already talked about, really, we shouldn't necessarily, I'm not going to stand here and mansplain about what feminism is. But what I think is important to acknowledge is not only that feminism is a topic and a set of practices, or rather to emphasize that feminism is a topic and a set of practices that affects all of us, whatever gender we are. And also more specifically, it's a topic and a set of practices that concerns all of us specifically in relation to English studies as a discipline, to English as a subject. Because I think English as a subject in the contemporary university and in the contemporary school is unthinkable really without the influence of feminist thought. And this doesn't just apply to the selection of texts and that we think, that we write about, that we read. So questions of who is represented, but also about the ways in which we think about, the ways in which we read texts. So what are they doing with language and representation? What power structures are being reproduced or challenged? How might questions of sex and gender intersect with questions of race or with questions of sexuality, for example? And all of these and many more questions are addressed by the wealth of thinking, of scholarship that's aligned with feminism in its many forms. So to ignore this or to think, oh, this isn't for me, is to shut yourself off, not only from its demands for gender equality, but also from the range of thinking it encompasses, from Mary Wollstonecraft through to bell hooks and some of the other thinkers that Maggie mentioned. And so to teach and to think about English in the contemporary university is to think about and read feminisms. And this applies to modules. We have a module at Queen Mary called Feminisms, which is specifically about feminist thought. But also, for example, in modules that aren't explicitly about feminism. So to take a personal example, I teach a module called Laughing Matters, which relates to the topic I'll come on to in a minute. And Laughing Matters is about contemporary comedy. So when we look at a TV program like Fleabag, we're thinking about how it might relate to a longer lineage of comedies set around the lives of single women, for example. Or when we're looking at stand-up comedy, because it takes quite a broad, encompassing approach to English studies as a discipline. This module, we look at TV, we look at film, we look at stand-up, for example. When we look at stand-up, we think about the historic underrepresentation of women in stand-up, but also about how women's stand-up performance can address issues associated with feminism, can be kind of feminist texts in their own right. And this doesn't just relate to contemporary studies. So I work mainly on contemporary literature, contemporary culture. A module on Shakespeare would now be unthinkable without addressing questions of gender representation, for example. So this talk of comedy is kind of heading into the territory of what I'm going to talk about in a bit more detail in a moment. So I'll kind of wrap up there, but what I wanted to emphasize really is that feminist thinking is relevant and valuable to everyone at a social and political level. But it's also, or that it should be, embedded in English studies. And this applies when it's not the explicit topic. So it's an important and necessary body of knowledge that gives us new ways of thinking and new ways of reading. So I will finish my introductory section of the talk then, and I'll move on to my slides and move on to think a bit more about these questions of gender and humour and feminism. Okay, thanks. Bear with me a second.
It's the same presentation.
I just thought I'd scroll through more quickly. Yeah. Oh, no, I've gone far. Okay, grand. So, I'm going to give in this talk as a kind of taster of, or at least of some of my teaching, and also to think about how we can apply some of these questions that we've already been introducing. I'm going to talk specifically about these questions of kind of dark humour, feminist laughter, and then towards the end relate that to Angela Carter specifically, because I know some of you may be reading Angela Carter's collection, The Bloody Chamber, so to think about how we can apply some of these ideas to her work. But I want to start by thinking kind of beyond or around the literary context, and to mention that they are thankfully like less common in recent years, but for a long time a staple of a certain type of cultural journalism about comedy, generally speaking, and it's been stubbornly persistent, this, has been think pieces and so on about the gendered nature of humour. And this is just a sample of fairly recent ones. Men are funnier than women, study claims. Why do people believe women aren't funny? The plight of the funny female. Are men funnier than women? Sorry, Christopher Hitchens, who wrote a piece about precisely that. They're not. And we see this, this is quite a frequent topic of conversation. And behind this is often the idea that, quote, women aren't funny, or at least that they, quote, aren't as funny as men. And this isn't true, obviously. We all know that. It never has been, as we'll know from our personal experiences, from our reading, from our viewing, and so on. But in the brief time I have, I want us to think about at least a couple of questions raised by this weird attitude towards gender and comedy. So why has women's comedy and humour been relegated to a secondary status? Why has that happened historically? And secondly, as the focus of our discussion is feminism or feminisms, how might comedy written by women relate to the types of feminist critique that are usually talked about in more conventionally serious tones? And this is just to give another kind of sample of this attitude, but the kinds of things that we're thinking about here. So this is from Reginald Blythe, English author and self-declared expert on humour from 1959. And he wrote, "Women have not only no humour in themselves, but are the cause of the extinction of it in others." So it's not just that women aren't funny, but they actually extinguish it, actively sap, they're fun sponges, sapping it out of other people. And this is admittedly a long time ago, but it speaks to this stubbornly persistent idea, this association between women and humorlessness. And this is particularly true on the topic of feminism. So hence jokes like this. Question, how many feminists does it take to change a light bulb? Answer, that's not funny. And this is just a silly joke, but jokes do matter. They do matter, and they can reinforce stereotypes by inviting us to share in laughter at a common target. It's what's known in kind of humour studies, which, believe it or not, is a thing. It's what's known as the superiority theory of humour. So these are some of the things that's associated with it. It has a long lineage. It's our oldest theory of comedy and humour. And the idea is that we laugh at people from a position of superiority and as a form of control, to keep them in line, to point out what's ridiculous or normal. We sometimes talk about that in terms of kind of punching down. So the idea that you're in a superior position and you're punching down at somebody in an inferior position. And so a sexist joke like the one I showed a second ago can be read as exclusionary, as excluding or marginalizing a particular group, because its comic premise is that feminists do not have a sense of humor or are against making jokes. Now, it's possible, and you may think this, it's possible to think that feminism is too serious, too grave and important a topic to make jokes about. But you might also think that the stereotypes about the humorlessness of feminists say more about the people who are making these jokes than they do. They say more about the people making these generalizations than they do about the target of the jokes. So perhaps like some of the gendered hierarchies that have historically been applied to literature, so domestic versus transcendent, domestic kind of female versus transcendent male, or genre versus literary, or minor versus major. Perhaps these categories say more about the people who are making and enforcing them. Their kind of judgments about value and the power structures behind those judgments. So what is good literature, but also what is a good sense of humour? And those are often defined by who's in power. So that's a brief kind of introduction to a series of ideas or a series of ways in which kind of gendered humour and feminist humour have been framed. But I'm interested, I don't know if anybody wants to contribute in the chat, but if I'm interested in your kind of thoughts on this, or indeed your questions about this. So please do contribute any questions about this as well as thoughts. But why is women's humour, do you think, being marginalised or denied? Have you witnessed these attitudes in practice? Are they kind of prevalent in your experience, either from reading or viewing or from your personal experience? Does anyone have anything on that? Or in the room, indeed. Yeah.
Yeah, good to see your questions in the chat as well. We've had one question from Rebecca about how does women's human topic discussion relate to feminism and gender. So I guess you're sort of coming to that, and we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. So I suppose there are a couple of ways. So initially, this question of the fact that when certainly histories of comedy and studies of comedy often focus on male text, male authors. So in terms of its relation to feminism, a feminist approach would seek to redress that, to think about, well, why is this particular canon of text being selected, being focused upon? Are there examples historically or in the present that we can look at and examine to redress that imbalance? But also, I think, which is what I'm going to come on to talk a bit more about, to also frame and think about the ways in which humour, jokes and so on, and literary humour can be a form of feminist critique in itself as well. So there's kind of two ways of framing that, I suppose, or at least two anyway.
So Oscar said that I think the internet has been able to exacerbate negative attitudes to feminism, which would lead to more people believing that women are not funny.
Yeah, so the idea that the internet has exacerbated some of the trends I've been describing, and in fact led to this attitude being more widespread. And I think that's absolutely true. And I think it's also interesting because when we're looking at English, English literature studies, we can kind of trace authorship. But I think online culture is, in a sense, has kind of made those questions more difficult because you can't necessarily trace authorship. It can be a very small number of people who are spreading this kind of malicious content. But that is something I do actually, we have a week on the module I mentioned on Laughing Matters on kind of memes and the political significance of internet memes and the way in which these kind of ideas can spread both for negative and positive very, very quickly. So I think that's a fascinating area of study. And I agree that these kinds of stereotypes and malicious content is kind of disseminated much more quickly, even if it often originates from a very small number of people. It can seem to have a much bigger kind of, or be much more widespread than it actually is. How are we doing for time, Ruth?
We're on half, so
about 15 minutes. Okay, grand. Well, I'll move on then to think more specifically. I'll leave that as a kind of a pending question, but why is feminism seen as a humorless subject? Are some things too serious to joke about? Because that's also a consideration when we're thinking about joking or humour as levity or lightness or something unserious? Can there be serious political content or intent in jokes? So Angela Carter, having raised this subject of feminist humour, I now want to think about a specific literary example. And the example of Angela Carter. And although I'm focusing on a single author here, I think that these discussions will hopefully could have broader relevance. You might be able to apply them elsewhere, even if you're not familiar with Angela Carter's work, or if you're not studying Angela Carter specifically. But just briefly to kind of introduce Carter in this context, she wasn't always in step with the feminism of her peers, and she often was quite a controversial, kind of tricky figure to reckon with. So this idea that we've been talking about, the kind of plurality of feminism, I think certainly applies to Carter, because she wrote, for example, The Sardian Woman, which was a study of the Marquis de Sade, a writer who's seen by many as a misogynist for his sadistic, the word sadism comes from his name, sadistic portrayals of sex and gender relations. But Carter argued she kind of reclaimed his pornographic novels as more progressive than they've conventionally been read at, as kind of more progressive and forward thinking in terms of their representation of female bodies and female sexual pleasure. This was understandably quite a controversial idea in 1978, and it certainly still is now. And if any of you are reading The Bloody Chamber, you'll see the influence of Sade in the title story, for example, with its representation of sadism. But Carter's kind of twist on that is at the end, the narrator is saved from the Marquis by her mother, who turns up at the very end and puts a bullet in his head. So that's her kind of, ultimately the Marquis doesn't kind of win, doesn't kind of become the dominant figure. And as with Carter's revisionist reading of pornography, she also had quite a revisionist approach to the possibilities of laughter and humour. So she wrote this essay on the Miller's Tale called Alison's Giggle. And Alison is this character in Chaucer's Geoffrey Chaucer's The Miller's Tale. And she writes about how a young woman tricks her husband in this tale and then giggles about it afterwards. She says, perhaps given the traditional male narrator in literature, the giggle is so rarely heard just because it expresses the innocent glee with which women humiliate men in the only way available to them. She's talking about historically through a frontal attack on male pride. To reproduce this giggle, a man must identify with a woman rather than with another man and perceive some aspects of male desire as foolish. Indeed, in a sense, perceive the idea of the supremacy of male desire as foolish. So we might take issue with kind of words like humiliate here, like, is that what we're necessarily always trying to achieve? But I think certainly in the context which Carter's writing, that's precisely what she means. But also what she's saying here, what she's suggesting is that laughter can be subversive, that there is power in it, that it's not just making light. She also says that the reason that women's humour and laughter have been dismissed is not that they don't exist, but because it hasn't been recorded. She talks here about the traditional male narrator, again, taking a kind of longer historical trajectory. If you're writing jokes and deciding what's a good joke, what's a bad joke, what's funny, what's not, then you might be more likely to tell a joke that portrays you as the clever and humorous one. How many feminist jokes, the superiority theory. You're more likely to represent, to tell jokes like that than you are to make yourself appear as the foolish, clumsy one who is tricked and laughed at, who is the butt of the joke. So I think that's what Carter's that was her approach to laughter, to humour in her work. She believed that it could have a kind of a critical function, that it could be a way of kind of punching up as well as punching down, to use that metaphor. And also this idea of kind of dark humour and the grotesque feeds, I think, well into Carter's writing. Because some of Carter's stories, like Puss in Boots, for example, in The Bloody Chamber, some of her stories and some of her later novels do have a kind of a bawdy edge, right? They have a kind of bawdy edge, so they're treating sex and relationships in this kind of comic, rambunctious way. But many of them are much more darkly humorous as well, as in the story The Tiger's Bride. And I found when I was thinking about this and revisiting Carter's stories, I actually found it quite hard to pick an isolated example from them, because I think a lot of her humour is tonal. You kind of read it in the tone and the way that she expresses things at ways that are kind of at odds with our expectations. So probably the example I'm going to show in a second will not be remotely funny on the slide, and you'll think I've got a sick sense of humour. But I think in the context of Carter's writing, we do frequently get moments like this. So, so in this story, The Tiger's Bride, it's a take on the Beauty and the Beast fairy tale. So the Bloody Chamber is a series of retellings of fairy tales. And the ending is surprising and perhaps unsettling, but also in its context, I think it's a gleeful, humorous reversal. So at the end, this is the kind of the tiger's bride. The tiger is the kind of beast figure, and the bride is the beauty figure in this. And this is describing the very end. He dragged himself closer and closer to me until I felt the harsh velvet of his head against my hand, and a tongue abrasive as sandpaper. He will lick the skin off me, and each stroke of his tongue ripped off skin after successive skin, all the skins of a life in the world, and left behind a nascent patina of shining hairs. My earrings turned back to water and trickled down my shoulders. I shrugged the drops off my beautiful fur. So as I say, not structured as a joke. It hasn't got a setup. It hasn't got a setup and punchline. But bear with me on this. So here, like, rather than revealing the hidden beauty beneath a beastly outer, okay, that traditional telling of the Beauty and the Beast fairy tale, both characters here are being revealed as beastly and kind of accepting of their beastly natures. So he licks the skin off, and beneath it reveals fur. So there's kind of a revealing of the beast within. Now, it's not laugh out loud funny, as I say, but moments like this are darkly comic because they reverse or upset our expectations in pleasing ways. And often sometimes troubling or confusing ways, because we shouldn't, I don't think about humour and comedy as simply being light, about moments of levity or release. They could also be kind of troubling or upsetting. And so Carter's consciously doing away with the niceties and politeness of a certain tradition of writing, and particularly quote unquote women's writing. And she's inviting laughter in the dark, so laughter almost despite ourselves, that upends conventions about taste and about decorum, you know, that idea of kind of making a mess, making mischief, and the expectations that we have about heroes and heroines. And some people have argued that these types of humour are examples of the linked categories of the grotesque and the carnivalesque. So what Carter, these are just brief summaries of these ideas. But the grotesque is associated with satire, and it relates to distorted or exaggerated depictions of the body. And it's been argued that writers like Carter depict and celebrate grotesque female bodies as a commentary and critique of classical standards of beauty. So if you think of like a classical statue, the type you might see in a gallery or museum, it's this kind of perfectly hermetically sealed alabaster white image of a body. And the grotesque is kind of a challenge to that. It's about kind of gnarliness, and it's about celebrating that as a commentary on this kind of perfectionist idea of beauty. And the carnivalesque is a literary style that's sometimes associated with Carter that celebrates chaos and the upending of convention. So Bakhtin, this Russian critic, that's on the slide there, named on the slide there, developed this term. He's drawing the tradition of the carnival, the idea that for a few days, kings mixed with paupers and normal social rules are suspended. And he said that you can find this reflected in this carnivalesque tradition of writing which upends norms. And so that's another way, I think, of thinking about Carter's writing and thinking about how feminism might feed into it. This idea that she's going against kind of expectations of decorum or nicety in these kind of darkly humorous ways and upending convention. And how are we doing for time? Okay, brilliant. And I've just got one more slide to finish with, just to kind of upend this. And then if anyone has any, questions, we can probably briefly. Okay, brilliant. We can return to them. So this is just to throw a kind of spanner in the works. So this is from Carter herself. This idea of upending convention, the carnivalesque as this, potentially kind of liberating force. Carter said that the essence of the carnival, the festival, the Feast of Fools is transience. It's here today and gone tomorrow. A release of tension, not a reconstitution of order, a refreshment, after which everything can go on again exactly as if nothing happened. And this speaks to the idea of comedy or laughter as a relief, but a temporary one. So carnival is kind of license. You say, here's your 3 days, you can have that, you can celebrate, do what you want then, but then after that, it's back to normal. So Carter herself is kind of sounding a note of caution about some of the grander claims that are made for humour and laughter. And I'll leave it there and just leave those two poles kind of suspended for you to think about. The idea that comedy, laughter, humour can be this form of kind of carnivalesque liberation versus the idea that it's temporary and it makes us feel better in the short term, but it doesn't actually achieve anything beyond that.
Okay. So we've got some questions in the chat. I think what would be really nice, so we can stick to time.
Yeah.
You can have a look at those in the Zoom webinar, and then have a look if you can answer in text as well.
Brilliant.
Yeah. Really nice.
Yeah.
Just so we can keep it moving.
Got you.
We're going over to a group session now. So
okay.
Thank you to you. And maybe you just want to say final words? Or? No.
Yeah. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'll look forward to looking at the questions. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks everyone. Just a short minute or so break while we move to. We're doing a panel now, aren't we?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Sure. Is it this? Oh, sorry. Where do we go?
Carry on through, yeah.
And I need to do the hugely is it this one? Cool. Exciting task of moving the camera and making sure that we can get it working. Cool. I'm just gonna stop the video just for 1 minute. We're still here, don't worry. Cool. Hey guys, do you want to take a seat? Someone's had that lovely sound. Thank you for that. Guys, yeah, so there's 3, and then we'll get 1 more chair as well. Thank you guys, we're just switching over now. And yeah, if you can speak nice and loud, I'll get a chair for Maggie as well.
Okay.
Thank you. And I'll try and sort out the camera so we can actually see what's going on. Cool. So yeah, am I struggling a little bit? So I'm just going to put I'm just going to take the background off. Just thank you. Yeah. Do you want to stop this and start again? So could you just start another recording? Thank you. Let me just turn off the virtual background as well. Welcome to our room, and we'll try and sort out that one. Oh, we should have. On which one? Oh, any of them? Oh, really? I don't know why that is. Let me just see. Is that any better? don't think so.
Does he read? Yeah. Does he read? Yeah. Oh, can you also see the slide, the written slide?
Can you guys see us? Okay, yeah, cool. Let me just sort out the I am pretty sure as well. And if you guys can just talk so we can just see, maybe Maggie, can you just introduce maybe so we can hear whether the levels are right?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Hello, I'm just talking. I'm just trying out the levels. Is that okay? That's that sound. Shall I carry on? Blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, do you want to turn your laptop around? It's very DIY here.
It's not too bad. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, so if everyone looks to this way, that'd be great. We're just about to start the drama session.
Okay.
So do you want to go now?
Okay, hello again, everybody. Welcome back to Queen Mary's Rediscover Feminism Day, where we're having talks about drama, creative writing in English at Queen Mary. I'm Dr Maggie Inchley, back saying hello to you, and this is our drama slot where we're talking about feminist performance making. And earlier on, I talked a bit about how feminist theatre often challenges the way the world is represented to us, especially the way that women are represented or gender is represented. We can challenge it, we can remake it, we can redo it in ways that suit us better. And on that note, I'm really excited and pleased to introduce you to three members of the, I think you might call yourselves feminist theatre makers. The theatre company that is Figs in Wigs, who graduated from Queen Mary about 10 years ago. Am I right?
Yeah.
And you've been making theatre ever since. There's normally 5 members of Figs in Wigs, but there's 3 lovely members here today. And would you like to introduce yourselves for everybody listening?
Hello, I'm Rachel. Oh, hi, I'm Alice. And I'm Sarah. And there's 2 others who are missing, which is another Rachel and a Susanna.
Great. So I wondered if we could start off talking about what you've really been doing in the last 10 years and what sort of theatre you've been making and how it's been fitting around any other jobs you've been doing.
Well, we started making stuff while we were at uni. And we just sort of didn't start after we graduated. So we didn't really notice. It wasn't like a plan. I think we just kept getting little opportunities. We applied for the Spill Festival in Ipswich. That was the stuff we graduated.
Yeah, or like the new world. That's when we applied.
Yeah. It just sort of never like a dedicated plan. It just sort of happened. Yeah. So and I guess like around our other work that we were doing, like we always, like from the beginning, we always met up. We're friends, best friends, survivors. So we would always.
Sorry about this. It's so glamorous. Do you guys mind just talking a little bit louder?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
I lost my train of thought, but anyway, yeah. We're
So
best friends.
sorry.
And did you meet at university? Did you meet at Queen
Yeah,
Mary?
we also did drama. Rachel and Susanna did drama and French.
Okay.
And we met at Queen Mary. We're in 3 different years, so we weren't all in the same year either. So.
Oh, that's interesting. So did you meet through the theatre making company, Queen Mary
Yeah.
Theatre Company? Yeah. Okay, got together in that way. Okay, that is interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was kind of almost a bit of an not extracurricular, but it wasn't. Well, I think you guys met on a module, didn't you? But me and Sarah, who were a different year, we ended up forming the company outside of sort of class time.
Yeah.
Which is probably another thing with how it kind of carried on, because it was already outside of our like formal study, and so when we finished graduating, we'd already met each other, and like it really sparked our interest in making performance in a way that was not part of like our what we were getting marked to do.
Yeah.
And so it kind of carried on as at first it was a sort of almost like a hobby, like we were doing it for free or for very little money, and having to sort of do bar jobs or cafe jobs or whatever work we could get our hands on alongside making, and then gradually over 10 years it's gone from that to actually being able to pay ourselves more, to be able to spend more time on it. And when we graduated, we'd already done 3 runs of Edinburgh Fringe because of Queen Mary Theatre Company. What's it called? Queen Mary Theatre Company. They, I don't know if they still do it, but they do this thing where you basically 2 companies or 4 companies get taken to Edinburgh Fringe and you have a 2-week slot and you do your show. So we went each year 3 years in a row with other companies from other the society and stuff. So we'd already had a network and an audience at Edinburgh, even though it was very, very small, but we still had an experience there before we graduated. So I think that did help massively. Yeah, and we met people through that as well.
We met Scotty.
Yeah, our very first year we met what's called Scotty, who was doing a sort of queer alternative cabaret night called Eat Your Heart Out, and they needed their dance troupe dropped out last minute, and Scotty happened to see our promo videos that we made for Edinburgh on YouTube, and then asked us if we wanted to do this slot. So we were like, first time ever in Edinburgh, first show that we'd ever made together, and then we also were given this opportunity to start performing bits of it, you know, in a sort of like proper context, you know, outside of the university, within the world of performance art and queer cabaret culture in Edinburgh. So it was like, it was very natural for us to carry on because it just in the beginning managed to kind of like be in the right place at the right time.
Yeah,
it felt. That's amazing, and it's so good to hear about your journey from being students and making that bridge with the theatre company, and then starting out as emerging as professional theatre makers and building it up over the last decade and going from strength to strength. That is a really incredible journey. And by the way, if you are watching this, if you are thinking about drama or drama in English, drama in French, drama film, this is your chance, if you have any questions, to ask some graduates, Queen Mary Drama, about anything you want, well, within reason, then please do put your questions in the chat. And also, as part of our short session, I hope to show you some of the video from your last show, which was Little Wimmin at Battersea Arts Centre. So you will see some of Higgs' amazing performance as well. We'll just have a little chat first.
We're just going to swap microphones.
Okay.
So let's try this one. So if people can tell us in the chat if this is any better, I might even put it a bit closer to you guys.
Shall we hold it?
It's okay, don't worry.
Yeah. Hello.
Should we speak louder?
We can shout.
That sounds better.
Project?
Cool, I think people are checking. And hopefully we haven't shoved it right in front of everyone's faces. We probably have. Yeah, you can only see a little bit. Sorry about that.
So as I was saying, we've been hearing about the journey of Figs and Wigs from being students into the professional world of performance making. And please put any questions that you've got in the chat, because this is your chance to hear from the horse's mouth what it was like to be a student at Queen Mary 10 years ago, mind you. But if you do have questions about that, then please do ask, use this opportunity. I want to carry on with my questions by asking you really whether you really do think of yourselves as feminist theatre makers. Are you comfortable with that label? And maybe also why you called yourself Figs and Wigs?
Well, Figs and Wigs was actually the title of our first show that we took to Edinburgh, which we picked mainly because it's on a voting system, and everyone gets 3 votes, and we thought pick something that's rhymes and sticks in people's heads. So yeah, that was the first show that was Figs and Wigs by Queen Mary Theatre Company, which was in Edinburgh. But we came up with that because my housemate at the time was studying English literature at Queen Mary, and she was saying that in medieval literature, Chaucer used figs to like talk about female genitalia. We were like, oh, that's really interesting. Yes, and let's go with that. And then we had like 2 ratty old wigs that sort of like wanted like as a quick costume. So we were like, Figs and Wigs, that works, Figs and Wigs, but it isn't actually that memorable because because people get it wrong all the time.
Yeah.
Our first ever professional show, which was at Roundhouse, and our parents came to be like, here we are.
Made it.
It said pigs in wigs.
On that first voting night as well, wasn't there a thing you were like blowing on the window?
Oh yeah, we were whispering it to try and get it into his head.
Did it work?
It did.
It did work.
We got the votes, but I think we got the votes.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was our first show, and then we just ended up being. People were like calling us the Figs after we did that show, and then the next two had different names, but we were sort of calling ourselves Figs.
Stuck. Another thing that stuck.
Yeah.
And when it comes to the feminism thing, those first 3 shows were more kind of about us building a sort of sense of humour and a style, and it was kind of less, maybe we could say like less sort of like politically led in terms of feminism, but it was about kind of like devising work, and we were working with these big groups. And then when we left uni, our first show that we made as a company that we took to the Roundhouse, where they called us Pigs in Wigs, was an exploration of everyday sexism, and kind of starting to kind of think about like using our irreverent style and sense of humour and sort of like serious approach to silliness to think about feminism. And kind of since, I would say anyway, since graduating, it was when we kind of started to think about putting politics more overtly into our work. But also the big part of our practice as feminist theatre makers is also about kind of collective work, and it's about, loads of our shows are about group dynamics and working, which is feminist, I guess. It's looking at us as a five and how we work with each other.
But then I'm just thinking of our first ever show, Figs and Wigs. We did have this sort of really sexist manual about how to date and approach women from like 100 years ago. And we used a lot of that content as like to sort of satirize it, and then just sort of say, look, what the hell is this? We've got a man with a very like manly, like RP, like old fashioned style accent to narrate it all while we sort of acted it out. So it was like placing a woman between yourself and the arm of the sofa so she can't escape, and like, you know, allowing her to slap you 3 times. How many times would she say no? You know, it was awful. So we did sort of like, we were like, this is not okay, so let's try and turn it upside down and turn it to comedy and make this really weird dance show instead.
And I guess like for the like thinking of even right now us making feminist, it is feminist theatre, it is feminist work, we are feminists, but it is definitely something that comes, like, we just are. It's not, it's quite difficult to explain. It's just like, as a collective of 5 women who identify as women, 5 female identifying people, we are feminists, and we're anti-capitalist as well, anti-patriarchy, because we like the collective and how we like work is that. But it is also not really something that we like when we get into the room, we're like, how do we make another feminist play? It's just something that is like within us. It's something that we do. With Little Wimmin, we had this decision to employ and work and collaborate with only female identifying or non-binary people, and that was mainly because of the like experience we'd had within the male-dominated theatre world, and how much it was so frustrating that we weren't physically allowed to. So it was almost, it wasn't that we were like trying to make a feminist stance, it was trying to like protect ourselves and make our show better. And it just ended up being a feminist stance in a way. So yeah, it's weird. It's like, we don't think, it's not like we're thinking can we do this feminist retelling of Little Wimmin, but it just was, because we got rid of all the male characters from the whole book. We only would give away a tiny bit of the, when the dad writes a letter to us, we just basically rewrite it as all blah, 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 which is like the, you know, it's a very feminist way of being and performing that show. But also it was just, for us, it was really funny, and it was really important that was the way it was, because it was us 5 doing it.
Yeah, the work is like, it's authentic to us, and our, like Sarah said, our friendship, and the fact that we want to spend time together, and that we find each other interesting and inspiring. And then the sort of, the more conscious decisions kind of come secondary to that. The decision.
you said so many interesting things there, and so many things that will stay with me, especially this serious approach to silliness. I love that expression, that sort of way of describing what you do. And really interesting to hear about feminism almost as a survival tactic in the world of theatre that can feel quite patriarchal or quite male dominated, and a way to sort of carve out your own world on your own terms, your own theatre making practices in the way that you want to do it. And I in a moment would like to show everybody who's listening and watching a clip of Wigs in action. But you've already mentioned Little Wimmin, your last show, which I saw at the Battersea Arts Centre, thought was brilliant. I just wondered, really, while I'm looking for that clip, if you could say a little bit about why you chose that novel from 1868 from Victorian times to redo in a contemporary way.
Yeah, it was a joke, wasn't it?
It definitely started as a joke because no one was really taking our like avant-garde abstract dance theatre seriously.
It was actually a joke that we made in, was it RFP? One of the rooms at Queen Mary.
Yeah.
Yeah, we basically were like, oh, if we don't come up with an idea that people will give us money for soon, we're going to have to move this up because otherwise we're going to have to move out of our homes.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a bit of a, yeah, how do we trick people into letting us into their theatre spaces so that we can present them with the work that we want to make. But how do we convince people to let us in?
And it worked.
Yeah.
And it worked.
Yeah, originally we thought maybe it could be a side project. Well, like we'd do like a period drama and then that would sell out, and then at the same time we could do our weird thing. And then we realised, hang on a minute, if we're doing the period drama, then that is the weird
That's
thing.
the weird thing.
So then we just used it as a sort of Trojan horse and then just completely turned it upside down and just like.
And the upscaling that's happened with since deciding to do Little Wimmin is just unbelievable. We were in studio spaces and then suddenly Grand Hall, the main space, and being offered like much more money and thousands of pounds. It was
Well, it is brilliant. And I'm going to show this. This bit was one of my favourite of many bits of the show that I really love. But what's happening in this bit where you're about to do the rug sequence?
I've never seen it.
It's like the second act of the play where the first act of the play was sort of like with these floating oracles, we describe everything that's about to happen. There's an interval after 20 minutes, which is unusual. It has to happen in order for us to set up this traditional period drama kind of awkwardly amdram sequence where we do our bestest acting possible. And this is probably the first time it starts. There's the first sort of chink that it's going to break away. So we do 3 scenes and we keep coming back on doing this, pretending to be the Little Wimmin. And this is like the first point where there's probably a bit of a sigh of relief that we're not going to do the whole book.
I'll show a bit.
I need to move out of the way.
If I see anything wrong, I'll raise my arm. And nod if you are all right. Now remember, keep your shoulders back, take tiny steps, and don't shake hands with anybody if you're introduced. And listen, don't worry about me. I'll be as prim as I can and not get into any scrapes, as long as I can help it. Thank you, Joe. Marmy should be home soon. Should we tidy up this mess before she gets back? Oh, yes, certainly. Roll around the islands, roll around the islands, girls, roll around the islands. Take your udders and take them down to the bottom of town. Roll around the islands, girls, roll around the islands, girls. Oh, this rug is so dusty. Sisters, will you help me beat it? Oh, absolutely. Beat. 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 Beat the rug, 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 rock the rug, rock the rug, beat 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 the patriarchy, 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 beat the.
Capturing on that was great. Because getting it all wrong. So please, pace,
Oh yes,
play.
I know. They're very interesting subtitles. Yeah. I mean, I just love that sequence because you go from being such sort of perfect sort of feminine beings, doing exactly what you're supposed to do according to your father, to these sort of, I don't know, it felt like there was a lot of, you were exploring the anger there somehow. I mean, is anger something that you were exploring there, or that motivates your work actually?
Yeah, definitely. And that sequence in itself didn't happen organically when some male programmers refused to pay us back in 2017. And, you know, like good women, we were just cleaning our rug for getting ready for a rehearsal or something.
Yeah, we were just cleaning the living room.
And we were like, let's take out this rug outside because it's this massive rug. And we were starting to beat it. And we'd just been talking about this really frustrating situation. And it just
We worked really hard, and these men just refused to pay us, and they were trying to like word it in a way that we'd done something, like I hadn't thought about something, so we just beat the rug, and then we're like, beat the patriarchy. And then we've always wanted to put it into the show. One of the first things, wasn't it? We're like, that has to go in somewhere.
Wow.
It has to be in there. So yeah, we revisit that anger. They did pay us, and also then the venue doesn't exist anymore. So
The triumph of Figs and Wigs. Yeah. So again, really so interesting to hear about how your sort of lived experience as theatre makers is bleeding into the performance that you put on stage and really motivating it and blending with the Little Women. But I didn't know that at all about that being a real experience, and I thought you must have been exploring the sort of anger, the sort of frustration that those women must surely be suppressing as a modern reader, like reading it now. You just, how can they be so perfect and accepting of the conditions in which they grew up at that time?
Yeah, I think we were quite angry when we read it after we said we were going to do it, and everyone was like, okay, we'll program it. And then we went to read it, and we were like, this is what we said, what we done. Yeah, like they're either like get married off or they die, and that's it. And, you know, Joe definitely didn't want to get married, and sort of was forced into it. It's just like, it's just really frustrating. So yeah, it's definitely that as well. I think it's those characters, giving those characters a chance to sort of break free, and then before they meet their destiny.
Yeah. And when we were sort of like developing it as well, it felt quite like what you said, the thing of like the modern reader, like reading it, it felt like Louisa May Alcott was in her capacity to trying or writing a feminist text, and was kind of really exploring the questions of gender and roles for women in the 1860s. But now, of course, it's 2020, 2021, 2018 when we started making it. And so we were also kind of trying to highlight the problems and issues and the questions that we had reading it, whilst also thinking about Louisa May Alcott and sort of imagining her. And there's a big speech, I won't say who says it because I don't want to ruin it in case you get to see Little Women at some point, but there's this, we did try to put into it this idea of like Louisa as the author and the issues that she had and the pressures that she faced from her publishers and from her fans as well about things that she had to do, like marry Joe off. Joe is representative of her. She never married in real life, and there's this kind of strong fight within Joe, the character, to not want to adhere to social norms.
Well, yeah, we've got a couple of minutes left. So maybe, are there any questions? Yeah, do you want to, it'll be nice to have some from the audience. Yeah, so Serena's going to read them out.
Yeah, hi. So
if you can repeat the question back.
Yeah, so you've spoken about some of the really horrible experiences you've had as women in a male-dominated industry. So Bella has asked, how do you reason with people who associate feminism with men hating as opposed to gender equality?
How do you reason with people who equate feminism with men hating as opposed to gender equality? That is a difficult one, and that comes up a lot. Yeah, it's almost like you can't say something without some non-feminists believe the same. But what about this? Or what if we turn it around the other way? Or if this was the other way, then you'll keep off whatever. I think it's kind of just best not to reason with those people just the other way.
Yeah, and that thing of like what has come up already today, this idea of like feminism and fun, and I think that something that we do as a group is we focus on the fun, and we try to we're so interested in comedy and humour, and that really drives what we do. And in some ways, it's kind of like, well, if you don't get the joke, then you're a loser, and it's not for you, and you shouldn't have a conversation. And the joke's on you, but we're not making the joke to be on you. But if you take
the shoe fits,
then
it's just frustrating, isn't it, that when you're trying to stand up for yourself, or stand up for a group of people, marginalized people, it's like it's seen as hate speech or something, when it truly isn't. It's just finally standing up against a massive systemic problem. And I think that's probably part of the issue why you need to keep standing up against it, I guess.
Why you should study drama.
Why you should study Queen Mary University.
Subtle prompt.
Yeah, that is true though, because I genuinely did. It was at Queen Mary that my Feminist was released, and I didn't really know anything. I came from a very, very small town in Wigan, and it's absolutely a great place to live, but it was very, very behind politically, I thought. And so it was a complete eye-opener for me to study study drama at Queen Mary. As for loads of other people, I imagine, but it was just kind of like, oh, theatre can be like cool, political, engaging, really helpful to communities. It isn't just about being a show off, but it does help if you are a show off.
And the nuances of conversation, that thing as well, like that it's not you can focus on the gender equality as opposed to like having to like think about how it leaves out people or like man hating. It's a great place to kind of explore all sorts of voices.
Definitely.
There's been some questions about that on the chat as well, so maybe if you do want to have a look.
That'd be great.
Yeah, have a look. But yeah, we're going to move on to the next session, but thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Figs and Wigs.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're just swapping over now. Thank you, Hannah. Thanks for your comments. That's very kind. Thank you, Chloe. Thanks for sticking around. And we're just going to switch over to Nisha for our last session of this quite bumper session. But yeah, then we're going to have a break. So stay. Make sure you go and get some questions stuff. But for now, let's get excited about creative writing. And Nisha's here to start off. Sorry. You know how to operate. Keep. Let me sort out the camera. So yeah, so we're just about to start the creative writing session. Need a bit of light. It's cool. It's got all. Oh. Cool. So yeah, thank you to Wigs. And now moving on to Nisha. Thank you.
Next question. And next thing to Wigs. Really inspiring stuff. And it's nice to go from the conversation, because I also just think kind of that so much learning is that's how it takes place. That's how it takes place in university, but also just in
Maybe let's use this microphone, so we know this is working. Ooh, sorry about that.
all right, I'll just repeat what I said. We're going to try something slightly different. So the format is going to be, I'm going to talk just a little bit. I'm going to play a couple of clips of some poets whose work I think speaks very closely to the conversations that we've been having already. And then I'm going to ask some questions, but I'd like to maybe just give a little bit of time for you to try some writing yourselves. I don't know where you are, I can't see you. So I don't know if the circumstances are right, but if they are, if you have a notebook or a notes app on your phone and you just feel like doing a bit of writing, I really encourage that, because if you study creative writing here at Queen Mary, any university, but Queen Mary, lots of what you would be doing is taking a notebook wherever you go, writing in class, on the bus, on the train, in bed, writing as much as possible. So yeah, we can start a little bit now if you don't do it already. So let's go.
Well, let's just try. There we go.
Thanks, Rupert.
That's all right. Yeah, should work.
All right, so I'm going to focus on voice, partly because of the things that I was talking about earlier, that when you're thinking about a feminist poetics or any kind of political poetics, so much of it is to do with how you use your voice, how you sound when you speak, who you're speaking to, who you're speaking for or against. So some kind of questions just for you to think about. What is voice? What does voice mean in literature? What are the different ways in which a writer might choose to use their voice or to give voice to something? What's the relationship between the poet and speaker or voice of a poem? This is a particularly contentious one because with poetry, it's often associated with a free flow of emotions. And sometimes readers just assume that with a poem, it must be the poet themselves speaking, where you wouldn't make that assumption with a novel or a play. And one of the things that it's important to kind of always reflect on is that there might be a bigger distance there than you kind of presume. And that can be a really fun thing to play with as well as a poet, to stretch that distance between yourself as poet and any kind of persona you might want to invent or exaggerate in your work. So that goes on to poetic persona, and that can be thinking about any kind of character you want to make up or a role that you might want to play. You can try out all sorts of roles in poetry and any kind of writing, actually, but I'm going to be focusing on poetry because that's my area that I teach. But this really does apply in all sorts of forms of creative writing. You can always try on different voices, almost like putting on different costumes, different wigs. How many voices and personae can you write in? How do you incorporate multiple voices in a single poem? We're going to look at some examples of that and ask you to think about how you might like to do that too if you were doing your own writing. So I'm just going to kind of run through a few responses to these questions, and I'd be really curious to hear your responses too, if any come up for you. Voice in poetry can be thought of as any kind of sound. It can be the way that the poet brings in the sounds of their environment. It can be onomatopoeia, alliteration, all of these techniques that you're probably really familiar with. It can be the sound of speech. Poets can write in accents. They can use slang. They can use lots of different languages all at once. You can incorporate song and music. Some amazing poets bring in the sounds of what they're listening to at the time as they're writing. And that's something that you could try if you haven't ever tried that before. Write while you're listening to music, or write down all of the songs that are stuck in your head and playing on loop, and then use those song lyrics and those little snippets to make something of your own. A voice can be something that belongs to a speaker. So this sense that it sort of comes from within, that you have to find your voice and sort of externalize it, and then throw it into the world. It's like something that's so deep within you that you then cast out from inside your body outside. But then there are voices that seem to come from outside in the first place and that are external to you. So you could think of that like voices when you're at the train station saying mind the gap. You could think of that as just overheard voices, and that can be a really rich resource for writers to use found text. So eavesdropping, overhearing, just writing down little snippets of things that you catch when you're traveling or walking or sitting in a cafe. There's also something about disembodied voice that can be really interesting to play with. Disembodied voice, meaning you can't quite see where it's coming from. It could be a voice on a radio, which in a kind of mundane everyday experience. It could be something more supernatural, maybe even spiritual. Voices are coming from above. Voices are coming from places where you can't quite see. And these are all really exciting things to play with in your own writing. Poetic persona. This actually relates very much to performance and to some of the things we were talking about earlier with Figs and Wigs. The poetic persona it's a term for describing the speaker of the poem, whether that's the poet or a fictional character, or even an object, an environment. So I'm a little bit of a etymological geek. Like, I love knowing the source of words, what languages they come from, what histories they've passed through. And so for any other etymological geeks out there, the etymology of persona is linked to the Latin for mask and to the Greek for face. And I think that is a really curious, ambiguous, double-edged sword. So on the one hand, you've got your true face, the thing that that reveals who you really are, some notions of authenticity and honesty and vulnerability. On the other hand, you have a mask, something that you can hide behind, that you can sort of show the world while protecting what's really within. So persona can be both of those things. You can use a persona to show yourself even more kind of boldly, or to hide yourself and perform. And then the final thing about multivocal poetry that I wanted to share, just to, in case you haven't come across it, just to think about if you want to try writing it, what techniques you could use. So you can incorporate dialogue into poetry lots of different ways. You can have voices coming in, speaking to each other, debating each other, telling each other they love each other. You can have a really, really loud, frantic, multivocal poem that's like a chorus or a clamor. There are lots of different ways of doing that. So you can use techniques borrowed from fiction. So quotation marks, putting voices in he said, she said, or in italics maybe to differentiate. You could borrow techniques from theatre and scripts and screenplays. You can have character A : and do something almost like a performance that just lives on the page, that doesn't really have any intention of being performed out loud, but is almost as if the page itself is the theatre or the stage where performance takes place. And you can also use spacing creatively. So you can use, I've had some great student work where students were experimenting with columns. So they might have one voice or one mood in one column on the left-hand side and another voice or mood on the right-hand side, or do something more like what's known as concrete poetry, where you arrange different voices in different shapes and have them all sort of speaking to each other in a visual pattern on the page. So those are some things that you might like to try if you want to experiment with voice in your poetry or anything else. So I'm going to play 2 videos. The first, I won't give you too much context. They're both contemporary poets, both London-based. Suhaima Manzoor Khan, who's also known as the Brown Hijabi, and I'm going to play a recording where she actually does a little bit of gives a sort of mini lecture about her vision for feminist peace, and she also recites 2 poems. So I'm just going to play one of the poems, but if you're interested, there are plenty of videos of her performing online. She's very, very kind of inspiring, smart, and empowering feminist. And then Travis Alabanza, who is also a theatre maker, actually, a performance artist and poet, who is speaking at a night all around gender and sort of advocating for gender non-conformity, a trans non-binary experience, and thinking about how the empowerment of certain marginalized groups is the empowerment of everyone. So all the ways we could grow, you can't grow on your own. It needs to be a collective effort. So when I play these recordings, I'm just going to pose these questions to you, and maybe if you're watching, you can write some responses in the chat, or just have a think to yourself. So we're going to be hearing them out loud. So the first one might seem a little strange, but I want you to think about the form of the poem. You can't see it on the page, but it can still sort of be delivered in a particular form using a particular concept or structure. So have a think about form and how the form that these 2 poets use enables their content to come through, enables their argument or their emotional expression to be sort of more easily conveyed. Then the second question, how many perspectives and voices do you notice in the poem? What's the poem's argument? I don't know if you often think about a poem having an argument, but often there's this emphasis instead on what a poem is about, which actually I think really limits a poem. It's never just about something. It's never just one thing. Poems work because of ambiguity, because of holding multiple meanings all at the same time. So you might think instead about argument, that it's trying to say something or do something or have some effect upon a reader or an audience. So maybe have a think about that. And then the final one is how many people or which people and communities does the poet speak for, against, with, and to? Whenever you write, at the moment, maybe, I don't know if anyone does write, if they share their work or not, but often, maybe until university, the experience of writing is quite solitary or private, that it's something you kind of do alone and don't necessarily share with other people. And then you study creative writing at university, and all of a sudden, it's all about sharing. It's all about looking at other people's work, giving them feedback and getting feedback on yours. That can be slightly unnerving. You suddenly have an audience and a readership that you weren't used to having before. But that's also the thing that we believe enables you to produce the best work, to have an awareness of who might be reading and how they might be responding, and how you want to speak to them. So I'll play the recordings now. And yeah, do put your questions in the chat and I'll have a look afterwards.
We can dramatically lower the channel.
Oh. We thought we'd
We have
skip
it,
the
we
ads.
have a preloaded version.
With a very short smart alarm. All of these things are not.
So hopefully you can hear. Can you hear?
It's really just a very well Women's March.
Actually, we need that to be maybe in YouTube.
20.1 investors in women in times. 1. Ask which women just came to your mind. 2. Ask which women did not just come to your mind. 3. Look in the mirror. No, you are not all of us. No, you are one of us. No, the genocidal times began long before you did. 4. No, you are not your body, but your body is yours. So kiss the mirror sometimes, even if it is cracked, especially if it is cracked. Do not wait to become a fashionable trend. It is faster just to love yourself. 5. Do not believe the exhibitions. 100 years for whom? Some women stood on the dark round bellies of others just to get a taste of the pie. No, there were feminists before their feminism. There was history before Europe, progress before progressive values were coerced into the world. There were working mothers before there was applause. There were fields and bending knees and factual night shifts and silence. The history of the world is not a history of great men, or nation states, or civilizations, or wars. It is a history of women. 6. Do not want equality with men whose power comes from their subjugation of others. Wish for more than being the other side of the joke. Wish for more than putting someone else into the capitalist punchline. For more than making cracks about small hands and orange skin. If it takes emasculation to bring down the ones in power, then we concede that being less man is being humiliated and being more woman is being joked. 7. The master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. After all, women CEOs don't mean much for the women working for them in low wage, precarious, life-threatening conditions. 8. Do not go alone. 9. Do not go alone. 10. There is always space for everyone. There is no reason we must queue for freedom. Some women perpetually at the back. It is all or nothing, so stand in a row instead. 11. You do not have to climb over me to climb upwards. Hold hands with the women you don't know, not just the ones you respect, not just the ones who don't avert your eyes from, not just the ones you get. You do not have to climb over me to climb upwards. 12. Do not let yourself be reduced. They will try to split you. Look for more than representation, call for reparation. 13. Ask the questions that scare you. Ask if the liberals are really so different from the fascists. The liberals will say they stand for freedom of speech whilst restricting what Muslims can talk about. The fascists will cut our tongues out instead. But what's the difference when the silence? What's the difference when it still means a drone dropped on your home? What's the difference when you're still in Guantanamo Bay? What's the difference when you're tortured? What's the difference when your body is still suspect? What's the difference when you're dead? 14. Liberation is not a door that opens from the inside. Do not wait. Do not ask permission, dress up pretty, blink your eyes, and ask to be let in, kick it down. 15, realize liberation is not a door at all, not something you walk through and enter, but something that's in you. Your sharp tongue, big heart, and weeping eyes. 16, liberation did not come from the ballot box. Liberation will not come from the government. No, the state will placate you as it dehumanizes you. No, women's rights only count if they see you first as human. There are women who will never be women. They are sitting in refugee camps, in detention centers and under rubble. They will tell you these women were victims so that in societies, had they only made it to the West, they would have been free like you. Had they only made it to the West, they would have been free like you. Had you only invaded their countries to save them, they would have been free like you. No, you are not free. No, this is only progress the way wrapping a rope around your own neck gets you closer to death. 17. Know that genitals aren't necessary to bring us together. The revolution doesn't need to be pink.
reclamation doesn't need to be naked. What makes us oppressed is not that we are the same, but that we are in pain. 18. Do not be afraid of the question. Just because it feels bad doesn't mean it is. Wonder if your confidence is more important than your freedom. 19. You don't point over the ocean to say it is worse than. We are killing the darker ones here too. We just let them die under circumstances in custody rather than outright assassinating them on the streets. We are separating the babies from their families here too. We just hide it better than put the camera elsewhere. We are killing civilians overseas here too. We just sell the bombs for others to do the dropping. We are barricading the border here too. We are surveilling the distance here too. We are murdering the marginalized here too. We are broken on the women. We are excluding, demonizing, and destroying. 20. Fight. Love uncompromisingly on your weapon, your hands, your foot, your breasts. But do not go alone. You won't make it alone. We won't make it. Come together, you too. It won't be easy, but we will train that. We are women, after all. I think that
was 9 years old. I remember when I was 9 years old, Mark cried at a sleepover because he missed his son. And all the other boys laughed at him and called him a wetwipe, but we know deep down we all wanted to chant in unison, me too, when we come home. I think about how when I was 6 years old, all of the class 3B boys had a birthday sleepover to Sam Cross, and we found his sister's makeup and spent all night putting it on each other, saying how beautiful we look. Steph, Sam's sister, caught us at around 11:34 p.m. But she didn't tell us off, she just laughed and said we looked stunning. And we made a makeshift catwalk, strutted around as a group of boys down the runway, and we all cheered each other on and posed we had no bodies to be ashamed of. 10 years later, Sam will see me in makeup at a birthday party and will call me a faggot, and I will cry, and Mark will laugh at me whilst all the boys forget that they were once me too. I often wonder when Sam stopped wearing nail varnish and instead started pointing fingers. When sisters stopped making runways for you and instead started blocking roads. I wonder what age you were when you started to leave behind the things that once made you feel weightless. How a group of boys can go from nail varnish and popped hips to silent locker rooms and stifled tears. Do you not cry anymore because you are afraid of the sound you may make? I used to love sleepovers with the boys, and not because I was a faggot, okay, maybe a tiny bit because but because it would be the only time I would see them scared. At 8 years old, I remember we played a game where we had to talk about our fears, and Trey said he was afraid of being alone. And I often think about Trey, and I hope he has not lost his softness, but something tells me he probably has. My last sleepover with a group of boys was mixed 13th. Something had changed. No longer talking, just staring at screens of guns, tits, or comparing our sticks, silence as we try to figure out who is not really real as we convince ourselves we are really real. Sit in circles jerking make-believe stories of manhood we've heard from someone else's father because none of ours are still here. This is no longer sleepover, just a funeral for the possibility of our genders. Here lies the chance we could be something more than repressed. Here lies the chance we could be something more than a man. My friend Layla once told me that at her sleepovers, all the girls would compare body parts in preparation for when magazines, men and bosses would do it later. I wonder what it would look like if we stopped telling ourselves all the things we are not allowed to do, and instead set our bodies free from rules. If we could go back to our bedrooms with each other and not take our bodies, our gender, their ideas as serious and make a catwalk for each other to walk down, what would it mean to try on someone else's gender for the day? Today, to say I am afraid of the dark, but I am more afraid of never knowing if I could be more than this. We played a game of whispers at the last sleepover, and you started the whisper with I'm afraid of violence. And by the end of the circle, someone said I'm afraid of gender. And I said it seems like you both whispered the same thing. Thank you so much. Thank you to Claire and all the Brewer team.
So we've got about 5 minutes.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. So there's only 5 minutes. In which case, what I will suggest is I'll just say kind of very briefly about those two poems, just something to think about. And if you like want to look at more of their work online. But in terms of that question of form, I wanted to share those two contrasting pieces because they both, Suhaima's poem is in the third person, and she's going through this kind of manifesto-like list of bullet points. It's very explicit, the ways in which she's making an argument, but she's also using literary techniques built in, like the use of repetition, the internal rhyme, the ways in which some of the words can kind of keep acting on you, can kind of be almost like earworms playing over and over again in your head. It's deeply personal, but it's also completely thrown out to other people to include and extend solidarity to different people, different experiences all over the world. And with Travis's poem, slightly different. It's much more personal. Maybe it's more what you associate with poetry, in that it's in the first person speaking voice. But again, although Travis is outlining instances of violence, of exclusion, of hostility on the basis of their gender and sexuality, they're also extending solidarity to all the boys they grew up with, who have been pigeonholed in different ways, who have been reduced as if being a boy means that they could only encounter certain kinds of culture, or different kinds of ways of being together, as if it means certain kinds of repression. So there's also lots of love and affection and solidarity in that poem too, as well as the sort of deep personal experience that's being expressed. So let's write. We're not going to have time for writing, I think.
They can take it.
Yeah, but you can take it away. I was going to say that. you can take a screenshot if you like, or on your picture on your phone if you want to try out any of these prompts. It's the sort of thing we do in seminars. So I won't go over them. I'll check if you have any questions about creative writing, or if you do, you can pop them in the chat just now. But there are different parts to it. So sometimes what we would do in a session is begin with prompts and then kind of write, maybe set a timer for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and work from one prompt to the next, kind of developing an idea or a piece until you sort of have a sense of what it might be. And the key thing I think with creative writing in class sessions is that you can't know what it's going to be when you start. You have to kind of go in with an open mind, and we often begin with free writing. So if you haven't done that before, it's a really helpful technique where you just pour out every single thing that's in your brain onto the page, onto your keyboard or your phone. You don't censor yourself. You don't worry about grammar, punctuation, spelling, anything like that. You just let it out, and think of it that as like a warm up, like stretching, and follow it through. Set a timer for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, depending on how much time you have. And just see what comes out. Usually by the 20th minute, you are somewhere else entirely, discovering all kinds of weird images and moods and tones that you didn't have at the forefront of your mind. And as soon as you get to that place, that's where you maybe start a different kind of more focused writing, like with these prompts. So I guess I want to sort of offer to you the question, while writing, how do you want to use your voice, your words? What kinds of things do you want to say? Who do you want to speak to or connect with, and how? Who do you want to extend solidarity with? That might be the first steps towards a feminist writing practice. And yeah, if you have any questions, I will have a look in the chat. But other than that, thank you very much for listening and joining.
Thank you, guys. So yeah, we're going to go for a short break now for 15 minutes. Hopefully you can hear me on there as well. But yeah, please do have a break. Make sure you get some air. Have a think about Nisha's prompt, which I'll try and leave here maybe as well. And yeah, go and get some fresh air, and we'll be back shortly. So we're going to stop the video now. So yeah, we'll be back at about 4 o'clock. So thank you for joining us so far. And we hope to see you for the next session as well. There's no audio going now, is there? Can someone check if there's audio? Can you hear it still? Okay. Thank you, guys. Thanks for your help. I'm not sure where it's coming from, but we'll try. Yeah, I'm trying on all of them. Is it muted on there? Oh, it's that one, yes, thank you. You can see this first. So we're live on sound now. Welcome back, everyone. We're just coming back. Oh, not this one. I did actually download it. Everyone sees my emails again. This one. See if you can get a good screenshot of my emails. Just saying nice things as always. Cool. So let me just change this. So yeah. So you should be ready now. Let me just check the video as well. Can everyone hear us? If you can put it in the chat, if you can hear us.
Yeah.
Yeah, should we just wait 1 minute just to check? Cool, so let's see. Yeah, so Sarah can hear us, that's great. And I'm going to introduce Cassandra. And I can't say your second name, I'm sorry, but you're going to have to maybe say it out loud because then I'll learn it at least. But yeah, so yeah, welcome back everyone. We've got loads of students in the room. So let's use this opportunity to talk about some of the things we want. There's no video yet, is there? For this video? Yeah, let's try this one. Cool. No video, all PowerPoint. That's strange. Cool. I think maybe we're not. Oh yeah, good plan. It's got to that point of the day.
Is that the camera?
So the camera's here.
Okay.
Don't worry, we'll adjust it in 1 minute. And this. Cool. So yeah, it should make it look nice in a minute. Yep, so is that okay now? Yeah, that's great. And we'll just move around if you want to stand a bit more like here.
Okay.
And then if you want to go left and right, it's this one.
Okay.
Cool, thank you, Cassandra. Maybe you can introduce yourself as well.
Yeah, sure.
I just want to check everything's live. Yeah, it looks like it.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so we're gonna have a bit of a session on essay writing, and yeah, I'm a third-year student at Queen Mary. I'm just studying English, and yeah, my name is Cassandra as well. Yeah, so the first 15 minutes we'll be going through the PowerPoint, and then we'll have 15 minutes to do any Q&A. So yeah, okay. So to start off, university is quite different from A-level because of the coursework. You're doing exams basically, and you will have some coursework which is more like the university experience, but yeah, so I think the big jump is that you will go pretty much, I would say 90% coursework. At the end of first year, you might have some exams for the Shakespeare module and the literature in time module. Not anymore? Oh, okay, well I did. Okay, that's cool. Yeah, okay, so basically it means coursework. So we'll just get into essay writing. We will see some tips and tricks on.
Yeah, just face that.
Oh, yeah, sure. On essay writing, some strategies, how to write an academic essay, and also about the writing process, which is something that's very helpful to kind of learn as a writer academically. So there's about like 5 good stages of essay writing, which is planning, researching, then actually writing, editing, and submission. Yeah, and as long as you can navigate the initial stages, then you kind of begin your first draft, and then you can kind of just get on with it from that point. Editing can also be a good stage for you to just keep writing. A lot of times I edit as I write, so yeah, it doesn't necessarily have to be those 5 stages. Okay, so just to go a bit deeper on that. So first off, you want to choose your essay question and your passage. And that means really analyzing the question, finding any keywords, any themes, or if it's directing you towards a certain perspective. And then you also choose your passage. The good thing about uni is that you can see your assignments for like weeks in advance, and you really get to kind of focus on one question so you can really adapt to it, which is different towards exams, because then that's really like you have about 2 minutes to do it. And then the next stage would be deciding your main arguments and your points. This is pretty much like the body of the essay. When you have like the introduction, that's the body. And then you need to find evidence and secondary material. A big difference is the material. So literary criticism at college or your institution, you're pretty much given the material by your teachers, whereas at university, you're expected to find it on your own.
And that means you use the library or any digital databases. And you're pretty much an independent learner at this point. You're not really spoon-fed any information, which is good because then that's when you develop. Even if you struggle, you will get better in time. And I think it's something to embrace rather than reject or to be fearful of. I think one anxiety people have is that essay writing can be really scary, and that if you get a bad grade on your first essay, that's like the end of the world, and it isn't. Even if you get a bad grade, you can use that point to learn, and that's really the jump at university. It's expected. You probably went through it already at A levels. You might have flopped a little bit at the beginning because it's much different than GCSEs. That's kind of with universities as well, but it's a lot softer. You will see there's a lot of resources to help you on this. So this is a good breakdown about the essay structure you will be expected to follow. But the good thing at university is that it's not as rigid. You're not really given a template to follow. You can write as much as you want, and you can, as long as it's coherent, you can get away with anything. Really, at A level, there is an expectation that an English essay is like this. You use Peel probably, which is a good kind of skeleton to follow, but it's not necessary as long as you make your point clear. So you will start with your introduction. You make clear what your question is and what you're answering, some of the outlines of your arguments. And you can give some helpful context in that point. You can highlight anything that's of interest, maybe like a cultural or historical point that you're focusing on that will become relevant. And then you develop out this in the main body, where you kind of really analyze and you use your evidence and you link any secondary criticism. Then your conclusion is your summary, and perhaps if you want to reflect and add onto something that you couldn't mention previously. Okay, so these are some tips. To choose, I think, an essay that fits your interest is very important, because not only will you not get bored, but I think you really get an opportunity to research fully because you're interested in it. So I think naturally you will put more attention to it rather than if you were arguing on something that you don't really believe in. Yeah, writing before deadlines, that's very important. You want to make sure that you can submit it on time and such. Number 3, be reflective and concise. Be mindful of the word count. You do get penalized if you get like more over 50 words or if you're under 50 words, but roughly that's like a good point. Number 4, I think that's something people can struggle with at the beginning, but again, you develop that over the 3 years, is to write in an appropriate academic register. They're not expecting anything like a scholar, but you're still expected to be very formal. You know, don't shorten any words, explain fully. Yeah, and just make sure it's not childish, if that makes sense. Sometimes at A level that can happen, but again, it's okay if you still have like some bits that you will let go eventually. And then number 5, yeah, draft, proofread, and yeah, since you have time to do that, you can always just change something. So that's good. Yeah, and something that we really focus on at Queen Mary is to kind of appreciate the writing process, not to be how do I say it? Not to rush it too much, don't just do it to get it over with, but appreciate how long it takes to write an essay, or how difficult it might be to gather some materials, because that's when you really grow as an academic writer. Yeah, and then that kind of links back to being interested in your topic. You really get to kind of have a bit of an introspection and look inwards, find out what you're really interested in. And that always helps, because in 2nd year and 3rd year, you will be picking your modules. It's nothing's chosen for you. So if you have a good idea of what you like, that will be helpful. And yeah, anything else on this analysis? Yeah, that's pretty much it. And something that Queen Mary is very strong about is support. So here's some support that's available at Queen Mary, because we know it's difficult to start university. We have this thing called academic writing fellows. So you get matched with an academic writer, basically. And they kind of help you through the process. You also have academic skills enhancement team, just people specifically for essay writing. We also have your seminar leaders and your lecturers. You can always contact them and ask for help. You also have your other students, and there's this thing called the past mentoring scheme, which is basically as a first year, anyone can do it. You don't have to like sign up for it, really, just show up. You get mentored by second and third year students who have already gone through what you've gone through, and that's a good chance to kind of, on a more informal environment, ask for help when you know that you won't be shamed for it, or you may be embarrassed by it. Maybe your seminar leader is a bit not like difficult to approach, but we may feel embarrassed by it. So it's good to have the mentoring scheme, and that's also good just more generally, even outside essay writing, for any university life questions you have or difficulties. It's good to just have someone to fall back on. Whoops, I think I went too quickly.
That's great.
Yeah, but if you guys have any essay questions or just anything in particular, we can answer that now.
Yeah, sure. So I think we've already had a view about what the difference is between A-level and university. Okay. So writing an essay, what's the difference?
Well, okay, so you're expected to write more formally. You're expected to have a good analysis and such. And you're expected to find resources on your own. I think that's the big thing, is that you're really independent. No one's going to chase after you. No one's going to give you material. You really have to go and look for it yourself. But the good thing is, with language, you can kind of break free and almost get creative sometimes, because you don't have to follow a specific structure, as long as you get your point across and it's concise and use good English. Yeah, I would say that.
So does anyone else have any thoughts? Maybe you could step up. Even also includes other people as well, because we've got other students in the room, haven't we?
Yeah.
So maybe it would be nice to have some questions from people. There's also people who want to, I'm not sure whether people can hear me. Lots of people want to hear more about the kind of university experience. Okay. So it might be good to talk about that. So maybe, does anyone else have any thoughts on essays? Do you agree with Cassandra? What would you think? Do you want to come up? Because it's a mic, don't worry. It's fine. Yeah, come up, say your 2 pennies worth, and if you just keep a bit of distance as well.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you, guys. Cool. That's great. Yeah, you can see. Yeah, don't worry.
Just on James's question about procrastination. I'm a chronic procrastinator. So, yeah, what was the question? Have you stopped procrastinating?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Imagine if I knew though.
Yeah, well, maybe you could talk about where you study. I find that really interesting.
Oh, you want to do a little Instagram plug?
Yeah.
So basically, when you're a student in London or at Queen Mary, you're part of the University of London group, which means you have access to Senate House. And I'm in my final year now, so I have to write a dissertation. And as I've mentioned, I'm a chronic procrastinator. So I have a really hard time doing things before the absolute last minute that they're due, which with the 10,000 word dissertation is not very helpful. So I just go to Senate House and I just sit and I let the vibes inspire me to actually do some work. And that is an honest student perspective on how to stop procrastinating. Just change your environment, basically.
I can't see the questions on here. Maybe
yeah, I can't see them on there either.
Maybe come in as well, so we can see on here. Let's have a look. Yeah, it looks like there's a few things in chat as well. So we've got the thing about how do you stop procrastinating? So yeah, maybe you could give a bit of advice about how to start the essay. I think that's the hardest bit. So how do you stop that procrastination and get into the work? I think some of the things you said about structure will help.
Yeah, so yeah, okay, so to stop procrastinating, it's good to kind of manage your time, basically. And it's also good to address maybe your anxiety, because I find that a lot of people who procrastinate, it's not that they don't care, it's that they might feel a bit overwhelmed if they want to start, and they feel like they have to reach a certain stress point to kind of get going. So perhaps if there's anything anxiety related, that would be good to address it. There's some good books on how to fix that. And okay, I think more practically, if you can get a good list of your tasks, so there's this site called, well, I think it's more of an app, it's called Notion. And it's a great place kind of to put everything related to university in there. You can have a to-do list, you can really note down when your essays are due. And you can also find some sources of motivation, I find. But that can be really anything. Anything personal, or you can also reach out to other students because it's likely that you're not alone. That always helps. Or perhaps you might want to speak to the counseling team if it's something like that. But I find that most people, they might procrastinate, but eventually they will do it. It's just kind of about getting unstuck, if that makes sense. I've also seen people procrastinate kind of as a result of having essays rather than exams. I think it's kind of some kind of cushion underneath you and it makes you feel a bit more safe to do it. But yeah, if you can find a way to kind of see all your tasks and know what's due when, that will kind of help you tackle that. Also, we have this site called QM+. It's kind of how you will access all your learning material. Each module has a page with all like weekly information, and on that website, there's also naturally there's a to-do list with all your assignments, and they will go orange if it's about 2 weeks close to the assignment. And if you see that every day, it kind of pushes you to maybe remember that you have this assignment coming up. If it's overdue, it will go red. So, you know, there will be some kind of physical reminder of your assignments. Yeah, if that helps. I'm going to see some more questions if we have any.
I was just chatting.
30 minutes late. Oh, that's good. Okay, if you can kind of already discover at A-level at what pace you work at, that's very good because you can use that at university. If you, especially with coursework, that's when you can tell how long it takes you to do something when you don't have like a 1 hour time limit at the exam. For instance, for first and second year, I started essays like about 2 weeks before they were due. I feel like that was a good space to think about the question and kind of gather materials before I even start planning it. Some time. What am I gonna say? What else can I say? Yeah, if you can break down the task, don't do too much at one time. Maybe do like 1 paragraph per day or 1 argument. And it also really helps to have a good plan, so you can kind of break that down even further. Maybe the days before the assignment is due, and then you can kind of bring it all together about 2 days before it. I always find that helps. Just looking for more questions. Oh, I see someone that's like inspired by the fear of the imminent deadline. That makes sense. Oh.
Well, and I guess one thing that might be interesting might be the difference. I guess it's a big change, people coming here from doing exams to going over to having more time to work, and you have to be a bit more self-motivated. So maybe you could talk about the difference between exams and kind of coursework.
Yeah. Well, yeah, the good thing is that I personally think that university is a lot easier than A-levels because you don't have to memorize so much material, and you don't have to kind of anticipate that like 1.5 hours that you get to write the exam. Yeah, I think it's about pacing and kind of letting yourself figure out your own timings, if that makes sense. That's what I'd say. Yeah, I mean, the thing with essays is that eventually, well, I was going to say that eventually they're usually you have to do them, but even if you miss it, I mean, you can avoid it. But yeah, there's always like resources to find and help to reach out to. I don't really have anything else to say, really. I think it's something people discover on their own, if that makes sense.
Someone's asking about Marilena is asking about the length of essays. So cases replied with 1,000, 1,500, 2,000. So you're not writing a book in the first year. It's kind of going to ramp up, isn't it? So maybe could you tell us a bit about the difference of writing a short essay versus a long one?
Yeah, that's a good one. I think at first, you don't really get hit by large word counts. First year you get about 1,000, maybe 1,500, and second year I think a big essay would be about 3,000 words. But then again, you're working up to that level. They're not like immediately pushing you to write such a word length. And the good thing about that is that you can tell how long it takes to do it. With 1,500 words, it might not sound that intimidating, but as you're writing, you might figure out that actually I don't have that much to say, or hopefully that you need to cut down. I would say that since, however long you figure out 1,500 words takes, double that when you see like a 3,000 essay come up. Yeah, and your final year, you will have your dissertation, which is 10,000 words. But I feel like throughout second year, as you may perhaps have multiple deadlines due at the same time, that kind of helps you juggle things a bit. So once you get to your dissertation, you might sort of find out that, what, actually 10,000 words isn't that bad, or rather 10,000 words isn't that long. It's about a couple of 3,000 words essays, if you can split your paragraphs into that, if that makes sense. So I find that the pacing is quite good and it's manageable, and yeah, you kind of like work with it really. That's what I say. Yeah, I guess the difference comes in how much you engage with secondary criticism. A 1,500 word essay will need maybe 1 or 2 pieces. But with 3,000 words, you're expected to know a lot more about the critical discourses around a certain text or an author. And you also write more. You might compare to other literature as well. That would come up naturally. Yeah, I think it's to do with engagement with criticism and that sort of context, most likely.
Yeah, we've just been asked about word count, and Katie's answered a little bit about word count. So maybe you could talk a bit about how. So people are always trying to go over the word count, but maybe you could talk a bit about advice around that. So Katie's suggested 50 words over from our policy. It's our policy. It's not just a suggestion. But yeah, maybe.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
I'm not very good at rules.
Yeah, well, I have to say that yeah, roughly you can go 50 words over or under. I have to say though, at one time I did about 500 words less, but I had a really good analysis in the rest of the essay, and I was engaging well with the module, so I wasn't really penalized that much. I still got about like a 75, which is quite a good grade. I think it's to do with your engagement, and it might be, say, like under the word count, but if you have really strong points and you've really explained them well and you've engaged with criticism to a good enough extent that you might even get away with it. But I mean, obviously stick to the word count if you can, but it's not the end of the world if you can't. But again, know that you may be penalized. Always keep that in mind. Don't be like, oh, it's unfair because whatever was happening in the background. There is still a policy to be followed. But yeah, I think naturally people will kind of anticipate the word length anyway, so they kind of know how much to do in the future as well. So you may not struggle with that as much. Yeah.
Someone just asked about. Do you want to read out the question?
Is it Hannah Haynes at university?
It's Hannah, yeah.
At university, do you type your essays up or handwrite them? Okay, so typically everything is given in digitally. You have to write them. If there's some kind of disability and you may need to have like someone accommodate that would be given through the disability office. But yeah, roughly everything is given in digitally. You type it out, which may be a bit easier. Really, I found it was a lot easier than like exams when your hand gets tired eventually. Yeah, that's a good question.
It's just worth having a good laptop and things before you start as well. Like
Yeah.
investing in those things.
Yeah.
I mean, we do actually have a laptop support fund as well, like if people don't have them. So it's really important to have that digital technology, because you're not going to be it's all going to be submitted online, isn't it?
Yeah, and eventually, well, the library is going through some renovations, but they're used to you could borrow a laptop for the day, and
Yeah, back now.
yeah, and now like,
What did they?
yeah, so you can really borrow like on the day as well. That's what I did the first year because I didn't want to carry mine around because it was too heavy. So
Yeah, that's the thing. If you've got a commute, and I've carried 2 today for this, and literally my back is killing me.
I know. Yeah, so I would just literally just before the lecture borrow one, type my notes during the lecture because I don't want to go through the recording later. I find if I can do it like on the hour, it's good. And then just return it when you're done. And then again, you can borrow one while you're on campus to do your essay writing. But yeah, typically it would be good to have some good technology. there's always assistance if you don't have the ability to get some.
I quite like that canal side. You know, there's a nice room canal side.
Yeah.
It's not that nice, but it's also right by a canal and it's got computers and printers. So I'm quite happy about that.
Yeah. Same with printing. The library has printers you can use. You get a printing allowance. I think when you first start, you get like some money in your card anyway, and then when you use it up, you get to add more. Yeah, I would say if there's any like difference to the way you submit something, usually it's disability related. But again, there's a lot of help around that. You get like an advisor and all that, which is really good. Yeah, just go through the questions again and you can find something further out.
Oh yeah, so I think we might need the last questions now.
Okay.
So maybe we take the last questions. Otherwise, maybe you could just summarize a bit of what you said so far.
Yeah.
And then maybe like choose the most important slide.
Okay.
And finish on that.
Okay, so to summarize everything, there's 5 stages to essay writing usually. I would say I wouldn't count submission as a stage, but I like crossing it off. So obviously
it's really important to get it in.
Yeah, but choose an essay topic or title, decide your main arguments, and then select relevant evidence and secondary criticism. Very heavy on the criticism. You're expected to find it on your own, but you can also still ask for help if you're struggling at the beginning. The kind of basic essay structure that works pretty much for everyone, and then you can kind of change it accordingly is, you have your introduction, and you have your main body where you develop everything and you analyze really deeply, and then you have your conclusion where you kind of summarize. You may add a new piece of information there, kind of like as to have a bit of a twist to it. Sometimes it's quite nice, but yeah, that's pretty much what you do. Random usual tips are choose something that interests you, start writing early, make sure you can meet the deadline, be reflective, be formal, and proofread, make sure that everything is like adequate. Appreciate the writing stage. Don't just like try to get it overdone with quickly. Really kind of use the essay as a time to further your skills as an academic writer, and that's really like what you get as an English student in particular is the ability to write. So it would be good to just appreciate that. And I think the most important slide would be this one, which is about all the support you can get as a student from other students, but maybe academic writers, your seminar leaders, your lecturers. There's a lot of help. You're not in this alone. And, you're always pushed to develop, but also supported, if that makes sense. That's how I would summarize it.
Thank you. That's great. Thank you, Cassandra. Big fan for you.
Thank
you so much. And you've given me a few minutes to get my presentation ready as well. Thank you so much, guys. We're going to be switching over, but if you want to have a quick breather, please do. And we'll get back to the last session of the day. So thanks for joining us this far. We'll wrap up with a bit on careers as well. Cool. Just stop sharing. Cool. And I'm just going to stop the video, but we'll just be back in a few minutes, around 4:30. I'm actually going to use my prop, but you won't be able to see yet. Thanks everyone for your thoughts on that one, and we'll be coming back in just a few minutes.
might be able to hear. Hi guys, we're just coming back. So not this one. I'm going to share my screen and hopefully we'll get going just in a couple of minutes. Cool, and I'm just going to make this big as well. Where's the view thing in here? Am I going blind? Oh, here it is. Why has this still got that side bit? My presentations were. Yeah, that's what I was thinking, but it's not allowing me to do that. Yeah. Oh yeah, well done. Thank you. Cool, so we're just gonna finish up the day with some hopefully interesting things about English literature and also how to follow your passion and work in the creative industries. Hopefully I'm in shot, I'm not really sure I am. There's no video, is there? Cool, so I'll start now and I'll probably make myself a bit brighter so it might wake me up a bit as well. Cool, so yeah, and I'm gonna put a background on because I'm really vain. Cool. Cool, and I'll turn this off as well. Thank you so much. Take care. Cool. So yeah, let me just change this and make myself look beautiful. Ish. So yeah, welcome back to the final session, and we're going to be talking about English literature, how to find your passion and really do something that you enjoy for the rest of your life, and hopefully, you know, want to do to get paid, but also to, you know, to enjoy and actually feel like you're fulfilled and want to kind of explore the world and come home happy from your job. So that's what I'm trying to help you do today. So yeah, so I always start my slides with this one, which is from Alice Walker. So she wrote The Colour Purple, which is an amazing book of kind of it's an incredible Steven Spielberg film as well. And basically the quote is, the most common way people give up their power is by thinking they don't have any. So you do have power, you do have agency to be able to change things and make a difference and also write and create things. And that's kind of my passion, is to kind of spread the joy of being able to do that, but also, you know, encourage people to do degrees in it. That's one side of it, but there might be lots of other options that you might think about as well. And even just increasing creativity in other subjects or in other parts of your life might actually really help as well. So Alice, thank you, Alice. Cool, so there's a couple of people on here. So you've got Fleabag and you've got Chewing Gum. So these are shows that both started really small in a little tiny shows and little tiny venues. And basically they became massive. And now both the stars are massive Hollywood stars and in Star Wars and things like that. So they started as short monologues that were written by their authors, and so they kind of can be taken and they can go on such a journey just from your first idea of maybe your life's a bit funny to going to Hollywood and selling that to millions of people as a TV show like Chewing Gum or Fleabag as well. So yeah, I'm Rupert. I haven't really introduced myself. I'm Rupert Dan Reuter. I'm the marketing manager for School of English and Drama. Queen Mary, you probably heard me all day, like probably going or something in the background. But yeah, my background is in three things. So arts, marketing and education. So these are some of the organizations I've worked with, and I'm really happy to have been at Queen Mary for 6 years, nearly 6 years, helping students see whether Queen Mary is right for them, but also doing lots of communications and kind of social media, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, my background is in arts. So I've worked for organizations like the Roundhouse, Soho Theatre, the Yard Theatre, which is like a little DIY theatre in Hackney Wick. Also To-Do List, I run a website about things to do in London. So if you want to have a look at that, go to todolist.london. I've also worked in more sort of general marketing. So with companies like Cineworld, London Borough of Hounslow, AKA, who do theatre marketing and museums. So I used to work for clients like the British Museum and National Gallery and Billy Elliot and some big musicals as well. So yeah, and Twitter, I helped Twitter write a book right at the beginning, so I wrote bits of it for them. And yeah, education is really my passion. So that's the third thing. So I teach a little bit, but mainly around professional practice and how to get a job. So that's kind of what I'm talking about today. But I've worked with other organisations like Rosebery College, which is a drama school, Southwark College, which is FE, so it might be the kind of college that you're in at the moment. And also Queen Mary, obviously. Cool. Yeah, so it'd be really nice if anyone's still here. I'm hoping, oh, we've still got 28 in the room. That's lovely. Thank you guys for sticking around. So what will be really nice is if you can put 3 things that you're passionate about in the chat. That's all you need to do. Thank you. Cool. So yeah, if you can put 3 things that you're passionate about in the chat, I'll try and do it as well at the same time if I can. But if people in the room can do that, but people online, it would be really great to see what you're passionate about. So I'm going to put my things, which you've just seen as well. So mine are arts, marketing, education. Thank you, Kira. That's great. Cool. And Hannah, that's great. English lit, obviously, history. Great. Marvel, yes. We should work for them. They have a massive office in London, in West London. So they're all part of Disney now, which is fun. Disney own everything. But yeah, so let's have a look. Yeah, that's great. Psychology, anime, literature. Cool. Books, Buffy, Doctor Who, Hot Priests. That's good with the Fleabag reference. Yeah, I saw that. I also want to show you guys my little prop, which I forgot to show earlier, or put in any sort of decorative. I really wanted to put it near fixing wigs, but didn't quite get the chance to do that. So this is my rainbow Christmas tree for you all. And yeah, it's very nice. Thank you, Hannah. Cool. Thank you for participating at this late hour as well. Marilena is so cool. She's only got 2, arts and performing. Marvel, BLM, yeah, Black Lives Matter, that's great, and history. So I'd say those interests are all some of the things that define you, and those things can really be part of your career as well. It doesn't have to be like the traditional things that you might have heard of already, like being a doctor, being a lawyer, being a business person. You might have heard of those. Your parents might be putting pressure on you to go towards those. There's lots of careers out there. There's lots of interesting things you can do. Not saying that none of those careers aren't interesting, because they really are. And as the brother and son of lawyers, I kind of know a bit about the law as well. So if you want to chat about that, I'll put some time into that as well. Cool. So the UK creative industries. Creative industries are worth a lot of money in the UK. So if you are trying to convince a parent or a friend who's going, why are you doing English? Like, why are you doing this? Culture is a big thing that we do in the UK. So yeah, the value is £111 billion. It's over that. So smack that in the face of all these people telling you to do STEM, and which is science, technology, engineering, maths, and all these things. There's a lot of money to be made in this country, but not just money, but a lot of enjoyment, creativity, and excitement happening in London and beyond. So yeah, look at the kind of industries that are here. The biggest one being like IT, software, games. But you might think, oh, I'm not techie, I don't like code. But think, actually, well, those coders need stories to tell, and they need people to market the games that they make, and they need people to write the copy that will make people interested, or critique, you know, what they're doing, and write reviews of the games. So yeah, there's interesting things. So film, TV, publishing, obviously a lot of people in English might want to get into that. Music, arts and culture is big. So I don't know if you've heard of like Adele or Harry Potter. They're like some of our biggest exports in the UK. So there's like almost like whole cottage industries, and not even cottage, big industries around these people and brands. There's 3.12 million jobs. I mean, this was in 2017, so it's growing. Actually, it's one of the only sectors in the UK that is growing. And yeah, 1 in 11 jobs is in the creative industry. So don't think that it's a rare thing. It's not impossible to get into. There are jobs out there, and I'd say it does skew towards London. So it is good to have, like, that's what I'd say about Queen Mary. It's good to get experience, and wherever uni you go to, or decide to go, you will have opportunities and take them, and go and do internships and make connections, and that will really help you later on. What else? Oh yeah, so obviously London centric somewhat, like 32% of jobs, but there's also lots of jobs all over the country. So wherever you decide to live, and you might think in other cities, I'm a Londoner, so I'm biased, I love it. But there might be somewhere that you think that's your ultimate kind of place. So there's loads of graphs on this page. I'll try and go through them. I'll try not to make them too boring. But basically, the one on the left is about the kind of good things you can do with kind of humanities degrees and the kind of skills and interests that will help you. So all the skills that you're developing now in your English classes and your drama classes, in your humanities, history, geography, are really useful for all these kind of jobs. And these are the kind of salaries that you're looking at with them. So things like account manager or creative lead or exec assistant, or the ones I really like around content and languages are still quite valuable. But yeah, just to say that there's lots of skills that you're developing now that will be really useful and profitable, hopefully, for you in the future. Just to say, the top right graph on here is just about where the industries are in the UK. So basically, we're a service industry country. We don't really make much. So the biggest amount of jobs are in are in services and public sector. So the public sector takes up 26% of our jobs. So that's things like the NHS, health, education, so schools, and defence as well. Professional and support includes things like law, business, that kind of thing, and services. That's where the bulk of our jobs are. They sit in those kind of two categories. And then we also have retail, which is big. If you've been Christmas shopping already, you'll know that retail is a big thing for this country. And yeah, and Christmas lights are there to prove it. So yeah, we don't actually make a hell of a lot. There's 8% in manufacturing, stuff like that. So, and even if you go further down, agriculture, we don't actually farm very much at all either. So yeah, services are really important, and people who do humanities, English drama, that kind of thing, they will be really useful in those industries, especially around those kind of public sector, professional support industries. So yeah, in the growing occupations, I just wanted to show you marketing directors is in there across the top. So there's a lot of marketing going on, a lot of differentiation, like brands having values, which is kind of exciting. Sorry, I said HSS today. Oh, cool. But literally, I was just going to say, yeah, there's lots of jobs available around the kind of administrative stuff, and that might sound really boring, but actually, yeah, there's loads of kind of interesting jobs within that. And as well, I would always say that you could look at like a portfolio career. So you could do something that pays you for 5 days a week, that pays your rent, and then you do something at the weekend that makes you interested and kind of excited. Just wanted to show some students and alumni who've been to Queen Mary. So some of them are famous, some aren't. And like, so Amir, he worked at the Tate, and now I think he's gone to the Science Museum. Trying to remember. So he's kind of in the middle. Fahima's at Penguin, so doing children's book publicity. Raifa Rafi, she's a lawyer in a Gold Circle law firm. Caleb Femi is an amazing poet. Annika's at Netflix. So there's lots of places you can go. It's not a sort of dead end way to go with your degree or with your area. There's so many jobs open to you when you have the kind of skills that you develop on these kind of courses, but also apprenticeships and other things you can do. I think I'll skip this one actually. But yeah, the first thing I'd say if you're looking into creative industries, creative careers, is have a look at this website. So it's discovercreative.careers, and maybe someone could put that in the chat so people can click out. That would be really helpful. Thank you. Oh, the amazing World of Gumball. Yeah, I love that guy. We had him for Show and Tell, which is our podcast series, which you can also listen to. I'll try and put a link in there or send some resources after. So yeah, James, I forget his second name, I can't remember. But yeah, so there's some amazing creative people who've come out of here from English courses, from drama courses, but also people who teach here and who are kind of actively participating in culture by being on TV, talking about books maybe, or being on, what's that thing called? Being on, oh, I've lost my thread. So they're out there making and being an artist themselves. Cool. So yeah, have a look at this website. What you can do is choose the kind of things that you like, and you'll get loads of job titles. And those job titles will help you search things like, if you look at those big job websites like Indeed or Twitter or any of those kind of places, it's good to have an idea of the kind of job you want. And they'll tell you the kind of skills and help that you could get around that. So discover creative.careers is a really good place to start. And I was just going to talk about a few resources of each industry, that kind of are popular industries that people go into from Queen Mary. So publishing, I'd say Publishing Post is a really good magazine run by young people with opportunities and all that kind of stuff. And I'll try and send out the links to all of this at the end, to all the people who've registered. But do just search this or this on YouTube, just search for this session, Rediscover Feminism. And yeah, so Publishing Post, great place to look. Lit in Colour is a new scheme by Penguin to try and diversify their kind of slate for their publishing. So they're working with schools to try and increase the amount of Black, minority, ethnic authors, and also, just people who are underrepresented. It's not just about all these labels. And Twitter is the perfect place to look for stuff in publishing. If you're into publishing and you're not on Twitter, I would recommend getting on there, having some sort of profile, but also just following some interesting publishers and people who work in publishing. Cool. So in media, I'd say Media Beans is a really good website for opportunities and lots of things. You can sign up to their mailing list. Also, Journo Resources is run by this girl called Jem Collins, who's just really talented young journalist who I think maybe struggled a little bit to get into the industry. So she kind of started this website to help others get in there. Journo Resources is great, and they do lots of events and things you can take part in, as well as opportunities. For film and TV, so we're getting loads of money spent on us, especially in London, from places like Netflix. Big companies like Warner Brothers are setting up in London and mainly in the outskirts of London, north and west. So it's really good industry to be part of at the moment. So Screen Skills is a training organisation run by the government where they fund training and lots of other things to young people and people who just want to get into film and TV. So look them up. Also, BAFTA is based in London, so it's worth looking up. BAFTA is like this big scary awards organisation, but actually it's actually a training organisation and to support up and coming British film and media talent as well. And also Roundhouse, they're a venue in Camden, but they also have a creative studio. So they're really cool if you just want a studio space for work. I mean, if you're at university or if you're at college, you'll probably have those spaces as well. Content and PR, so that's the kind of bit that I work in a little bit. The dots, if you've heard of LinkedIn, LinkedIn is very boring for young people, I know. So the dots is the kind of more visually friendly, fun version of LinkedIn, basically. And if you have any questions about any of this, please do let me know or drop me an email as well. I'll put my email at the end. So Social Media Examiner is just all about social media trends. Social media is a big industry at the moment. So think about how you could get in there. If you're interested in it, it could be a really lucrative job for you. So keep up with the latest trends with Social Media Examiner. Also, my favorite blog is later.com, their blog. So later.com is like a Instagram scheduling tool. So you don't have to do Instagram all the time, which is, I still sort of do it quite a lot, but in terms of saving time, it's really great. And their blog is the best on the kind of features that you that are just coming out that they don't really explain when stuff comes out in Instagram. So it's good to have someone explain it to you. Also marketing comms, so Marketing Week and Arts Jobs are really good places to look. Yeah, and now my next one is just about the kind of power of kind of English and stories around in the world. So there's three things I wanted to talk about. One is stories. So how important stories are to employers, to business, to industry, as we call it now. So across all these careers, so like teaching, marketing, startup, big tech, so Facebook are always trying to tell a good story. You know, they've had all this hoo-ha about Meta and, you know, all these people getting really annoyed at Facebook. So they do little things to kind of improve the story as well and try and do a lot of advertising to help us think that they're good people as well. So yeah, stories are really important to every business. Also, empathy is really important, and that's one of the things you learn in some of these degrees, is learning to step into another character's shoes, or learning to be responsive and critical, and not just take things as the status quo. Listening to other people's voices is so important, and important in our degrees as well. So empathy is really important to industries like mental health, social work, charities, education, and a lot of our students go into those fields as well. And also the serious careers, I'm here to talk about the fun, creative ones, or apparently fun, but usually quite a slog at the same time. But all of these subjects and kind of the arts and humanities can help you get ahead in all these sort of traditional things like law and politics and administration and sales and all that kind of stuff. And I think all of those kind of degrees will help you with all the traditional degrees as well. And it gives you more options, not less, I would say. I think if you go down the kind of doctor or lawyer route and you don't like it, it's kind of like, oh, and then 3 years later, you're like, oh no. And I would say it's not a bad thing to change your mind and try things. So yeah, this is a quote I really like from Tyrese. It's from an ad campaign by Nationwide, the Building Society. And it's basically showing you how poetry can be used in an advertising campaign. So every time I turn on TV, I'm disappointed in the depictions of Generation Z, but it should be Z. And yeah, so I really like this way that brands are starting to use poetry, and using it a lot more now, actually. It's got even bigger than when this campaign came out. And there's lots of transferable skills. So you're going to be really useful within organizations. So with like history, it's all about analytical research skills, so sources and finding good sources and all that kind of stuff. And then business and marketing is obviously about management. So you can go in, manage a company, turn it around, make more profit or make more money for charity, and make sure that lots of people are getting helped. You know, that's a really powerful thing. So yeah, that's some of the transferable skills. If you want to tell your mom or dad or friend who doesn't believe you. Cool. So, I'll skip this one. Yeah, so then we go to avenues of inspiration. So there's some really good ways you can get inspired, like in the run up to going to university or thinking about what you're doing next. So here's some 5 really simple ways you can learn a bit about the industries. One is BBC. So BBC, obviously, National Broadcasting Corporation in this country. And they do some really cool schemes, including Academy, BBC Academy. So they do lots of training, free training. Sign up, look at them on Twitter as well. It's really cool. Writer's Room, if you're into writing, they do script submission. They do like lots of resources, including videos and stuff on there. So have a look at the BBC. BFI, if you're into film. So Future Film Festival happens every year for 16 to 25-year-olds. Lectures.London, I really like, and I probably shouldn't be telling other students about this. But Lectures.London is one of my favourite websites. It's basically a kind of feed where all the university events go into one website. So if you're thinking about studying a degree or whatever, you can kind of go to all the free lectures that are in the evenings or whatever and sort of check them out. I say that's a really good way of understanding a department or whatever. And we do lots of free lectures and things anyway, so have a look on our Twitter and things. For those, Roundhouse, I've mentioned them already, but they really are great, and they've helped me in my career learn how to do things like video editing, sound editing, lots of other things. Not live streaming, I'm learning that myself. But yeah, so Roundhouse, and then University of London Taster Courses. So this actually is a University of London Taster course today. So we were listed as part of that, and they help promote. So thank you, University of London, which we're part of. So yeah, thank you, Madiha, who's there, who always helps us out. Thank you for that. But it's a really good chance to, for free, sort of get to know universities. And I say it's a big decision. There's 3 years, you know, it's worth taking a bit of time to see them and take part. How am I doing for time, guys? 5 minutes? Yeah. Cool. So things you can do. I've just got a couple more slides, and three quick things you can do to skill yourself up. One is make a blog, Instagram, or a podcast, or a portfolio, somewhere to put your creative stuff. So even if you don't think it's that creative, it's an essay you've written at school, put it somewhere, put it on a blog, put it on your Instagram, like your professional Instagram or whatever. The other one is get work experience. It's never too early to do that. And as much as that whole thing of like friends and things like that, it's good to work with your network and see who you do know and who you could ask for help or, you know, advice or whatever. And also make your own projects. Don't wait for things to happen. I know people in year 12, year 13 are doing some amazing things within colleges and schools. So share them with us. We really want to see them. And also develop, third thing is developing additional skills. So things like video editing, photography will make you so valuable. I'm always looking for photographers and can never find them. So learn it. You know, you've got a phone, you're a photographer. Just learn it. And this one I always put, I used to put create your own damn blog, but now I just put create your own blog. So 2 people have done this. They've created like a Wanderer, which is like Chloe and the team have created Wanderer, which is a really cool literary journal. Have a look on that online and you might see some interesting work on there. Basically because we didn't have one, and then it was kind of interesting and it was all student led, which is exciting. And then Soda, who started Diaspora Speaks, was basically trying to find a place for the voices of people of colour. So it was an interesting idea, and the school supported her, but also she did, you know, had the room to do it. Ooh. I'm trying to think. Yeah, so I think I'll just quickly talk about some challenges, and then I've got one more slide, I think, and then we're done. So if you do have any questions, make sure you put them in the chat or drop me an email. I'm really happy to chat anytime on what's it called? Teams. So this one, I'm quite a challenging person, so I find it quite difficult to work with others sometimes. So sometimes you might want to do your own freelance stuff that's just your own projects, rather than working within a company or creating your own business or creating a side hustle. The second thing is, another challenge is lack of confidence or overconfidence. I've probably gone into the overconfidence now. But I promise you, used to have a real lack of confidence and kind of had to push myself out of the boundaries and work for a shop. So they basically made me talk to every customer, and that really helped me get out of my shell and actually talk to people and be interested. And half of it is that, just being interested in other people and also respecting them when you're talking too much, like I usually do. And the right jobs being available. So there's never the right jobs, there's not the right jobs. I'd say it's quite a buoyant industry at the moment, but you kind of got to keep your eye out at all times, even when you're in a job. That's kind of when you're most attractive as well to employers, when you're kind of employed. The first one is tricky. Get as much help as you can and getting the first big internship or job, and get help from your university or school or college career service. That'll be really helpful. Also get a mentor. That's my other big advice. So these are some of the mentors that are available on the Queen Mary network. And also Arts Emergency, which is another really cool place. It's just someone to big you up and have a chat with you. And yeah, I think I'll just finish on some things we're doing. So we're already doing Creative Skills Academy, which is free workshops. Some tasters, this is one of them. Actually, this one is not right. And then Show and Tell podcast is a good place to look as well. I'll send around this resources link at the end. It might need a bit of updating, so maybe don't look at it until I send you the email. But I just want to say a big thank you for spending your day with us. And thanks, I love all your comments. But yeah, if you have any questions now, I'm very happy to answer. Otherwise, we'll wrap up and we'll say a big thank you to all of our speakers who've been amazing today. So Huw, Nisha, and who else? Maggie, and the Figs in Wigs, and all of our students who've helped us today. It's been great. Thank you so much, guys. Thanks to Cassandra for her amazing presentation on essays. And who else? Serena for helping with the presentation, and lots of other people. Cool, so I'm hoping everyone's done pretty much. Thank you, Marilena. Thanks for sticking around to the end, and Ellen. And I think we'll wrap up there. We're available if you want to email us, scd-web@qmul.ac.uk, or the Twitter, Instagram is the same, and also our website. So please do get in touch. We want to hear from you. Which one? Yeah. So this is Faisal from our admissions team. Is that still sharing on here? Yeah, I think it is. But yeah, I think we're gonna finish up now. So yeah, just a big thank you, and I'm hoping you can still see me somewhere. But yeah, yeah, we just want to say I'm going to stop the stream. But yeah, head off and let us know if your feedback. We'll try and get your feedback via email. No, we'll send you an email with a feedback link. So hopefully you'll understand and can fill that out. Otherwise, thank you for spending your day with us, and we'll yeah, be in touch soon. And don't be a stranger. We're always happy to chat. Thank you, guys. Cool. I don't think we're gonna stop when I can find the button. Cool.